Good evening. I hope you're doing well. Today is Thursday. As I mentioned, I'm not able to be there in person with you today, but luckily it's the last time this will happen this course because the next 4 classes I'm able to be with you in presence. I decided to take the advantage of today to record the class so that we wouldn't miss up on anything in the course and look at some very specific areas, which in a way are more about teaching than about discussions. So we can go over them at the beginning of the next class in case there are any doubts or anything. Let me start by sharing my screen. So we're looking at this course, which has 3 core competences under the preparing for a negotiation, negotiation techniques and styles, and the heroes, role models, and the ideal negotiation. Today is the last class of competence 2, basically, which is techniques and styles, but it's also the first class of heroes and role models because you'll see why in a second. Competence 1 was graded with a class presentation that you will pass. Competence 2 by the exam. I have not received, and this is past 9 o'clock La Paz time, any new questions. So we'll see what we're going to do that as soon as I can look at what everyone has sent, but no one has resent anything else. So maybe some people have not finished the exam. We'll see how we deal with that. And then a third one, which is the class presentation. And for those, I'm still missing a few heroes, so we'll look at that in a second. If you approve the 3 competences plus get a good grade of over 60% in class participation, you can pass to the final exam, and that's with an average of 60%. And the final grade of the course will be the average of your course grade with the final exam. Competence 1 is about how to prepare for negotiations, so everything before. You understand your biases, you understand the other culture, the sources of power. It's important to understand what power you have, how you can increase this power, and how you can increase influence. We started with the first class with an introduction to the course, the teacher, and the students, then looking at the biases, the history of international negotiations, understanding cultures. Power, how to increase your power, and trading in services. And then competence 2, we went to negotiation skills in particular, and these are the Harvard principles, the stages of a negotiation, the science of persuasion, the concept of going to the balcony that William Murray coined, public and private negotiations, why one stems from the other and what they have in common and what they have different, the stages of a negotiation, the planning phase, and the importance of BATNA and concession strategies are key concepts, building a relationship, exchanging information in the first offer, the concepts of framing and anchoring, persuasion, agreement, the private negotiations, the type of sales, the marketing piece, mix, the 4 Ps, the types of international selling, and the International Chamber of Commerce that defines the Incoterms and the international commercial contracts, the standardized contracts. Differences between a private and a public negotiations, how to collect information for decision making, and we saw a little bit on the female negotiation style. And on that, my bad, I missed one slide the last class, so we're going to go back into that in a second. We also saw a few case studies. Evolution of dolphins, Volkswagen, lactic peel, lithium, sex trains in Jamaica, Taylor Swift, the Cuban Missile Crisis, Campos de Solana. So a little bit of everything. And as I mentioned, I missed out one slide on the female negotiation style. So I mentioned this slide, and we went over this slide, which are the main characteristics, how women seek to end conflict that started, how women can find it challenging to be dispassionate, so not to bring everything into the discussion, how women negotiate this and backlash, how it works with other cultures and how you understand the managing that. With some cultures, it actually works well because it forces the other side to be nice and treat people nice in a better way and brings down the tone of everything. In other cases, they can be offended, so it's important to understand these things. The importance that women always focus on the other side's needs. So you basically are better prepared to go for a win-win negotiation if you have a woman in your team because she understands what the other side wants. Women are good at leading the discussion, and sometimes how women will leave the room to concede. So it's almost a physical thing that happens there. Now, the slide I missed was about when are women better? And again, this is a big claim. These are generalizations. I owe you which information it is, but I'm almost certain it's Kellogg and Northwestern. So women are better when you're negotiating is about advocating for others. Remember the Erin Brockovich, where you're not negotiating something for yourself, but something for a general cause, for the general welfare of the world, of the planet, everything. Women tend to be better negotiators. When they negotiate for things they really care about, again, because of the whole emotional piece, sometimes it's difficult just to be involved in something that you only care up to a certain extent. Women have strong problem-solving skills. You know it from everyday life. Women can solve more than one problem at the same time and can still keep on and not lose track of what's important. So the aim not position focused, but objective oriented. So what you want to achieve. Women balance the likability versus professionalism. So you can still be professional and still want the other side to like you. And there's no reason why it should be one or the other. And women normally manage that better. Women are very good about reframing a negotiation into solving a problem. So it's not my win is your loss or your win is my loss. Together we're solving a problem. Women normally avoid ask for themselves, so they avoid for everyone else. They will ask things for a partner, for a kid, for someone they know, seldom about themselves. Women will use inclusive language, and inclusive language does not mean finishing the words with an E in Spanish. Inclusive language means us, our, that it's about building something together. And also women invest in likability and rapport, invest in trying to establish a relationship, develop that trust, connect in that way. So you'll find many ways in conferences and the rest that someone speaks, and the people who go up to the stage to talk to the person who just spoke from the podium are women. And it's because they say, oh, I thought what you said was really interesting. This is my card. I want to be in contact with you. And that's more often than not done by women than by men. Again, I'm generalizing. These are cultures. We saw the importance of understanding the different cultures, the Hofstede model and all of that. But in many cases, in particular in the Western countries and throughout the Americas, with different degrees, these are the things that we find out that no Western university finds. Female negotiation style. Important to always have a woman in your team, if not even leading your team, depending what you're doing and all the rest. So we jump into today's class. And before today's class, we're looking at, we said as the competence 3 negotiation heroes. You saw my ideal negotiator presentation on Andrei Gromyko. We saw a little bit about using artificial intelligence, ChatGPT. I told you could choose from any Nobel Prize winners or from this other list, which is quite a long list. And quite a few of you have chosen, but not all of you have chosen. And there's some really interesting names in all these lists. So we're still missing Matias, we're still missing Mauricio, Luciana, and Bruno. And I think that's it, yes, because we have everyone else. Adriana is starting off with Kofi Annan, Milena Nelson Mandela, Carlo Mauricio Hillary Clinton, Belén William Murray, Adriana Angela Merkel, Maya Elena Roosevelt, Mireya Barack Obama, Natalia Patricia Espinosa, Adri Ramírez Loza, Kusi Woodrow Wilson, Juliana Taylor Swift, Ana Simone Iturri Patiño. And as I mentioned, you're all going to defend your candidates with a 15-minute presentation, say 5 to 6 slides, explaining who your hero is, telling us a little bit about that person, saying why you think that person should be considered a negotiation hero, and showing some evidence that that person uses any of the skills or resources that we studied in class. That person prepares well for a negotiation, that person knows how to bring power to a negotiation, that person knows how to generate trust, that person knows whatever it is. You will be graded on the accuracy of the information, the aesthetics of the presentation, your creativity, and on the evidence behind the choice, the research you've done. Now, you can use, of course, ChatGPT and other AI tools because there's a lot of names and we don't know all of them well, so whomever you choose to study, but be prepared to be able to defend it and to have your own conclusions. So, for example, if when you do the research, it guides you to someone else, and that shows, then you're in trouble because everything that ChatGPT or any tool gives you, you always have to validate and double check with another tool. If not, you could really mess it up. Aside from this presentation, which are on the dates that we saw on the other slide, you will have one final class, and that is the final class, the 28th of November, in which you'll have 1 minute to present your candidate. And in that minute, you will have to convince your classmates that your candidate is the best candidate. So 1 minute for a final sales pitch, that does not count to your grade, is more to, so that as a course, we choose our negotiation hero. And you saw the example of Andrei Gromyko and the AI, how to use AI. So what are we going to look at today? Today is a really important class because we're looking at another aspect of the AI. Let me sum everything up. What does the ideal negotiator have to have? The ideal negotiator has to know and understand his biases, needs to understand and respect the culture of the other side, and needs to understand what power he or she has. And that's power as a person, the 7 sources of power. The person also needs to understand what power his or her organization has. If it's a country, these things. If it's an organization, what all the other sources that we saw. Then that person has to understand what alternatives he or she has to increase the power through networks, private or public, through finding allies, through maybe multilateralizing a bilateral issue, or by growing him or herself using the drivers of globalization to grow your company or your organization beyond your borders. The ideal negotiator has a skill set, which is a competence number 2. The skill set comes from understanding the Harvard principles of negotiation, understanding persuasion, understanding the different stages of an international negotiation. The plan, the build a relationship, the exchange info and first offer, persuasion and agreement. Now, the ideal negotiation needs to have a lot of other qualifications. Needs to be ethical, because anything that's not ethical will bounce back on you. You'll have problems in the end. You need to build a good team. You need to understand your audiences, who you're responsible for, constituencies. You might be responsible for a whole country to tell them how you negotiated this peace agreement or this border agreement or whatever. You might be negotiating for your boss only. You might be negotiating for your family, whatever it is. Understanding your knowledge gaps, what information you do not have, including the risk of falling into the trap of false information. Understand your BATNA, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So when you're ready to drop because whatever they're offering you is not of no interest. Have a concession strategy. So before you start, already know what it is you can give away in exchange for something. Understand the hopes and fears, your own and those of the other side. Understand the use of anchoring and framing techniques to fix a price, to fix your minimum expectations, whatever. Have a closing strategy. Okay, when are we going to close the shutters? When are we say this is the end? You need to practice, anticipate, and simulate the different situations. And you need to prepare for disruptive behaviors, i.e., the other side not wanting to really engage or wanting to muddle the waters and complicate your life. Another important thing from another book called, it's an article actually in Harvard Business Review called Getting to See, Ya, We, Hi, and Da, which is a pun on the William Murray Getting Past No. It was done by a Dr. Edith Meyer and published in 2015. And it's about negotiating in the different cultures. So one of the things you need to adapt about your style when negotiating with another culture is, first, you need to adapt the way in which you express disagreement. If in front of you you have, I don't know, an Italian, it's okay if you shout, say, oh, I disagree with what you say, and this and that. If in front of you you have a Japanese delegation, it's not okay to raise your voice and to be all dramatic, because they will be offended. For them, there's no need to do all that show to express your disagreement. So you need to adapt the way in which you express your disagreement with the other side, depending on who the other side is. Hand in hand with that is know when to bottle it up or let it all pour out. So when do you need to be calm and collected and only say what you need to say, or when you should throw all your emotions at the table? We saw a little bit of this when we were looking at the Campos de Solana case, about how the family can come and tell the whole story and the rest. And there he was right. You were talking to an American family of Italian origin about an industry where passion is very important, wine. But that same style of saying, it's my generation, it was the dream of my grandfather, this was the house that my grandfather built, all that, if you go to Wall Street, who cares? You would just look stupid coming with an emotional argument with these people who are very square and very control of their emotions. So that's the other thing you need to adapt when negotiating with different cultures. When to bottle it up, keep it in, or let it all pour out. There's an interesting diagram on that, which is from the same article, which is on how to prepare to face your other side. And they basically define nationalities by whether they're expressive from an emotional point of view or not expressive, or confrontational or not confrontational. And confrontational does not mean that they always want to pick up a fight. It just means that they're not concerned if something goes wrong. If you have to say no to someone, you don't really care about it because it's okay. I mean, we're here to do business, so I'm not here to please you. We're here to do business. So normally the Orientals tend to avoid confrontation, but normally the Orientals tend to be unexpressive. So we remember the drawing of the Germans versus the Chinese on how to express your feelings and everything. Well, as you can see here, Japan, Korea, Sweden, and even the UK are mainly unexpressive. They will keep the same face no matter what you say, but always try to avoid confrontation, always try to find a way around it. Whereas some other countries, and many of the Latins are in that camp, will avoid confrontation but be very emotional expressive. Brazil, Mexico, India, Saudi Arabia, the Philippines. So remember the story I told you about Brazil and the company that used to buy wallpapers? Well, they were very emotional expressive. They were very clear they enjoyed my company and my partner's company. They were clear about feelings. They would open up to the whole family and everything. Now, because they wanted to avoid confrontation, they never told me they were never going to buy from me because for them it was two different things. So for many cultures, it's very difficult to say no and to stop someone and to say no. For others, it's okay, it's more manageable. On the other hand, on the confrontational side, you have the Dutch, the Germans, the Danish. They don't mind. They're just saying what you say. It's not personal. And to be honest, I find that with the British sometimes, in which you can be as aggressive as you want, provided it's not a personal debate. You can say if you like this bottle of water or you hate it, but I'm not discussing your choice of bottles of water. I'm discussing if this is fit for purpose, if the plastic is good, if it will hold it and put it upside down, if I take it to space, will it last? I'm discussing the matter. So I can be really passionate, even though you like it and I dislike it, because it's not about if you're right or I'm right, it's about the bottle. And on the emotional expressive side, you find a little bit the Americans, but mostly the Mediterranean Europeans, Italy, Spain, France, Israel, Russia as well. The Russians don't mind to tell you off that you're wrong, because of course they're right. They're the imperial nation. They're the nation that came, that's the whole Putin position. Putin doesn't mind to be emotional expressive and confront. Putin believes he's doing this to restore the glory of Mother Russia. And if I have to prove it by sending a missile, I'll send a missile. Emotional expressive and confrontation. So understanding this is the second thing in an international negotiation. Number three, learn how the other culture builds trust. We were saying the example of Coloca wines and Campos de Solana. You build trust by sharing your family history. You will trust by bringing the winemaker who knows what he's talking about so he can speak the same language with the other winemaker. Or you bring trust by bringing crates of your own wine and giving them to them as a present so they can taste it. Or you bring trust by inviting them and paying them for them to come to Bolivia and see your field in Tarija. How do you do it? So learn about how the other culture builds trust. It might be that you build trust by bringing a common friend. It might be that you bring trust by not approaching them directly, by being introduced by someone else. There's different ways. Avoid yes or no questions. We saw this already in the class. The problem with a yes or no question is that it limits you. When you say yes, that's it. When you say no, that's it. There's no room for negotiation. So never ask for yes or no. Say, what do you think? Do you agree? Do you think we could find a way for this? Never anything that will take a yes or no, because yes or no is end of the road material. And finally, be careful about what you put in writing. Only put things in writing when you're 100% in agreement with what you're saying, because if not, it can be used against you. So it's important about that. So negotiating about across cultures, another interesting tip for the ideal negotiation, to understand this. Now, the ideal negotiator also has to have an ethics, and we're going to look at two of the aspects we did not see that were on the list that I presented you just now. And ethics is at the end of the day the difference between right and wrong. If you're an ethical person, is that you want to do right and that you can tell the difference, which is sometimes not that easy. So what is right, what is wrong? You could define what is right as what is wrong from a psychological point of view. Does it make me feel right? Does it not make me feel right? Do I believe it's right now? You can believe about what's right and wrong about my morals, and that includes religion. So what I'm taught as a child that my religion believes is right or is wrong, is lying right or wrong? Well, I lied that this was the minimum price I could give you. Will I go to hell for that? Or is that an accepted lie? Ethics, what's ethical, what's correct? This is almost coming to the same logic, but with the mind, not with the heart, not with religion. arriving to the same conclusions, but because your mind explains you that if you do things in this way, it's good for the society as a whole. If you do things the other way, it's bad for society as a whole. And finally, the law. The law will always say if you're doing something wrong, right or wrong. So if the law says something that you should not be exchanging inside information and you do it, well, you're doing something wrong, as easy as that. So it's important to understand that. Now, it's interesting to see why people lie, because we all lie, one reason or the other. So the vast majority, the 22% on the top, is personal transgression. So it's you've done something wrong and you just want to cover up. And something wrong does not need to be kill someone. Something wrong could be something as small as did not do your homework in time, or you showed up late to work, and you come up with an excuse saying, sorry, I had to take my kids to school, or sorry, the traffic was terrible, or sorry. I mean, that's still a lie, but it's a lie just to cover up that you woke up late or whatever. On the other side, we have economic advantage. So some people lie to gain a financial benefit. So they have two jobs and they show up late regularly in one of the two jobs, but it's because they want to keep the two jobs. Or they don't tell someone that there's a big deal happening in this shop because they want the deal for themselves, because it's only for the first 10 that show up or whatever. Second, personal advantage. So something that helps you beyond money. So it helped me in a career move. So I told my boss that it was me who discovered this new contract or me who discovered this new customer. So it's to gain advantage in an organization or something. Third, 8% self-impression to generate a positive image about yourself. Humor, you lie because you exaggerate. So you say, oh, yes, I have a black eye, but you should have seen the 10 of them, how they finished. And of course, it wasn't 10 of them, it was only one. But you exaggerate deliberately to make the story sound better. Altruistic, sometimes you lie to help people. This might sound wrong, but for example, when someone is late and to a meeting and you say, oh, don't worry, I only arrived 1 minute ago, and you've actually been waiting for 20 minutes. But it's just not to make the other side feel bad. Social and polite, which is again a bit similar to that. Malicious, sometimes you lie to damage the other people, to hurt the other people. So you say, oh, I think that person stole from the company, or I saw that person with that other person, or that's a malicious thing. Pathological, when it's a disease, there's people who are compulsive liars and cannot be objective about reality in any case and just make up things. And known, the 7% of the lies that people don't know where they came from. And finally, avoidance, escape. You prefer to think that I did not get the promotion because that person was better and not because of something I did. It's always easier to find the blame in someone else than yourself. By the way, this is some research that came from National Geographic Society, commissioned by the National Geographic Society of the US. And Tim Levine, who's mentioned there, was a key researcher in this. Now, the first thing to go in a negotiation is the language. You remember in the Cuban Missile Crisis that the key thing was that the US called the fact that all the ships were stopping, ships coming into Cuba to check if they were bringing any weapons, the US called it a quarantine. Because if the US had called it a blockade, which is really what it was at the end of the day, it would have been an act of war. And Cuba and its allies could have gone and attacked the United States. But by calling it a quarantine, it was not an act of war. And the excuse to call it a quarantine was that when they revised the ships, if the ships had food or energy products like oil, they were allowed through. And it's only if they found weapons in the ships that they would stop them. So technicality, the first thing to go in a negotiation is the language. So be very alert if you see the other side calling things in a different way, because that could be the beginning of someone wanting to play games with you. This is a photo I took from a supermarket in Buenos Aires a few years ago. This product no longer exists in this way. But the interesting thing, these are these quick soups. You open a package of soup, you put it in a mug, you put some hot water, you stir it, and you have a soup. And this is arvejas, green peas. I'm not sure, there's other words in Spanish for it, but I can't remember what they are. Petit pois, they call it here as well, but it's a French word. Anyway, the one on the right is the light, the diet product. Now you will notice the one on the left has 5 envelopes with 70 grams, whereas the one on the right has 5 envelopes with 52 grams, and it claims it has 31% less calories. Of course it has 31% less calories. It has less calories because it has less product. It's like if I gave you a full chocolate bar and then I break it in two and I say, this has half the calories. Of course it has half the calories because it's half a chocolate bar. Now, is this right or is this wrong? It's legal. I'm sure the lawyers for Unilever, which is the owner of the brand Knorr, has checked it. And it's legal because all the information is there. But you can question whether it's moral or not. Because, yes, okay, fine, I'm ingesting less calories, but I'm also being given less product, actually, probably for a higher price even. So, lies are all around us, no? We need to be alert to them. This is another photo from an ad, a billboard in the Buenos Aires Underground, the subterranean metro de Buenos Aires. And it's a figure of a person, and because of a legal requirement, you have to put the sign you see in the bottom. The image of the human figure has been touched and modified digitally, Photoshop or whatever. And they do that precisely because everyone then makes this weird association that if you eat the net, which is one of these creamy puddings, sweet, very sweet and high of calories, that you'll end up with a perfect skin. And clearly one thing has no connection with the other, but it's important to understand that if a NAD agency has changed the human image, then that is artificially modified and it's not like what the person looks like. Again, lies. We're exposed to lies all the time. Now, ethics, also known as moral philosophy, is the part of philosophy that involves systematizing, defending, and recommending what is right and what is wrong. The term ethics comes from the ancient Greek, and it has sub-branches. And it basically, the key thing here is it's what actions are right or wrong in a particular circumstance. So if we judge, I don't know, the Spanish colonization of the Americas by today's moral precepts, it's clearly wrong. If you judge it with the ideas of ethics and morale of those days, it was clearly right. And the same with many things. So it's very important not to get too excited and examine everything by our own ethical or moral principles, because everything has a moment and a time. And there's lots of things we do today that in the future will probably be judged wrong by others. And we'll see. We'll see. Time will tell. So this is very important, especially if you want to do a practical approach at this course. I'm in the practical course. So there are some things that will tell you something is right and wrong, and some tools that will help you. An organization based in London called Transparency International, which is all over the world, publishes every year this Corruption Perceptions Index. And this is an index based on asking people, do you think your government is corrupt? And the people in those countries say something, and that something puts you in a certain list. As you can see here, Venezuela is dark red, and Nicaragua is dark red, and they're the worst countries in our hemisphere. Bolivia and Paraguay are not doing too well. Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, Uruguay no, Peru, Ecuador are not doing brilliantly, nor are Mexico. So only Canada, US, Chile, and Uruguay are on the yellow zone, which is on the brighter or less corruption side. Forget about Africa. Europe is mostly on the yellow front. Forget about the Far East, the mostly orange and red. These are the countries in the Americas. And you see the last three are Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Haiti. And then the top ones are Canada, Uruguay, Barbados, the US, Chile, and Bahamas. How do you prepare? You're going to negotiate with someone from another country, and you don't know if that person or that organization is going to be ethical or not in their behavior. Well, the first is you need to know the law. You need to know what you can do and what you cannot do so as not to get into trouble. If they offer you a bribe, can you accept it or not? I mean, probably not from a moral point of view, but also from a legal point of view. If they offer to pay your hotel, can you accept it or not? Well, if I'm a government official from Bolivia and another one offers to pay my hotel, it could be that they're trying to influence me. So maybe I could, maybe I shouldn't. Know the turf, know the country you're going to, know what are the conditions there. So we're saying what's ethical in a certain place in time might not be in a different way. So if you go to the Middle East, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia, people will give you very, very important presents. And that's their way of saying they value you having come to their country. An important present might be a gold watch or something like that. But it's also offensive to return it. So maybe you have to accept it, but there are ways so that that does not mean that it compromises your independence and your judgment. And we'll see these things in a second. Your own organization, company, even government can have its own set of mission, vision, and values, which will guide you to understand what is right and what is wrong for your company, for your organization. Is it okay to accept this, to accept that? Is it okay to obtain information? I mean, the whole concept of, for example, insiders trading, which is when you buy or sell shares because you heard private information about the company. Is that right? Is that wrong? Pay your staff well, so that is less temptation for them to actually want to play with money and accept other people's money. Audit. If you don't audit and control, then you'll never know what's happening. And you have to try and as much as possible that your accounts reflect the reality. Just don't put yourself in that position. If somebody in Venezuela invites you to go at 3 in the morning to a dark part of town for a private conversation, chances are it won't be good. So it might be that in Norway it doesn't mean anything, but in Venezuela, chances are it's not good. So don't put yourself in that position. Establish and follow your company or government rules on accepting or making presents. The story I was telling you about Saudi Arabia. Most organizations have a monetary limit, and if you exceed that monetary limit, you need to declare it or you need to do something about it. Maybe you have to sell it, maybe you cannot accept it, maybe you can give it to the organization. Each organization should have a policy on these things. And control the use of cash. Most corruption happens in cash. Oddly enough, people don't give you a receipt saying, I received $100, $1 million as a bribe for doing this contract. So if you hold back on the use of cash, corruption will be less prevalent. And finally, avoid discretionality. By discretionality means that in each case you act in a different way. You should have a very consistent way of acting so that every time you're in a situation, you deal with it in the same way. That's extremely important. So that's ethics in a nutshell. You see, very quick, very speedy, but it's important to be an ideal negotiator that you are aware about ethics in your side and on the other side. You spot any wrongdoings. Now, there's a couple of other things that are tricky. The first one is disruptive behavior. What if you negotiate with someone who really doesn't want to negotiate? They say they want to negotiate or they humor you to make you waste your time because in parallel they're talking to someone else, because it wouldn't look good if they wouldn't welcome you. So, for example, you have a border dispute with the other country, and the other country says, okay, fine, I have a lot of international pressure to sit down and discuss this. So what I'll do is I'll go and sit down and discuss it. But I'm not prepared to give anything away. So they're just making you waste your time. So what do you do? How do you handle it? So the first thing is to understand what these disruptive behaviors are. So this is a quick list of some of them. The first one is preconditions, or also what is known as forum shopping. So it's when the other side say, I will only accept to talk to you if you do this, or if you don't bring this person to a negotiating table, or if we don't discuss this. I mean, there's some talk that now with Trump in power in the US, he takes office in January, that the whole Ukraine-Russia war might change because the US might say, okay, let's change the discussion. Let's allow Russia to keep the 2 Russian-speaking zones in Crimea in exchange for them to move away from the rest. And that's a precondition. That's a precondition that the current Ukrainian government does not want to accept. They say everything or nothing. What's this that you, US, for not seeing your land being taken by someone else, are saying that I should give them a bit of my land in exchange for keeping the other bit? So that's preconditions. And that's a disruptive behavior when someone tries to put preconditions to your side. Forum shopping is the same. When you go to an international forum like the United Nations and you start buying for people's wills to help you out. And different countries have done this in different way. They will pay, they will send food, they will send international loans, they will do different things to try and buy the wills of countries that up to now were not interested at all in what you had to say. But all of a sudden they are interested because you gave them something, and in exchange they need to be interested. Number 2, reframing. We've seen the concept of reframing again and again, but reframing can also be a disruptive behavior. Because if I have a problem with you and you bring in, I don't know, your whole football team behind it, then it's not fair. My problem was with you, not with your whole football team. So what's this all about? So the first example here is a real example. We were looking at these codes. You know how many countries have these hexagons that are to be used when your product has high calories, high grease content, whatever it is. Well, Argentina was one of the last countries to adopt this. And the excuse that the Association of Producers of products of food products was saying is, let's not agree something for Argentina. Let's wait until we agree on something for the whole of Mercosur. And because they knew that it would take the four countries years to get an agreement on anything, they were really delaying the whole problem. And that was their technique. So if you know that's what they're doing and you want this agreement to happen, you can see it coming. You say, no, we'll discuss it first as Argentina and then only eventually as Mercosur. But that's it. The second is committees. There's everyone who's been in negotiation and in powers knows that if you want to block something, you set up a committee. So every time there's an accident or some natural catastrophe or something your government has not foreseen, the first thing a government will do is set up a committee. Why? Because committees tend to first stall the discussion because it's a lot of people who need to agree on something. So rather than have a quick decision, you then need 3 months until they reach a conclusion. Second, for a committee to have everyone in agreement and sign a piece of paper, it ends up being the lowest common denominator, so the minimum point of agreement, and not the best. So what you end up by doing, sending something to a committee, is dumb it down, bring it to a very basic level. So that's reframing. Attacks, loud, angry speech, profanity, and vulgarity. Someone starts shouting at you. Oh, you're stupid, and I knew that was going to come from you. Of course, you're stupid. Your whole family is stupid, and I know they tried to steal from me the other time, and that house you live in is not your house. And personal attacks. You have to try and keep your cool. Remember William Murray? It's not about you. Go to the balcony. That's not what it's about. You have to keep your chill, keep your cool, saying, I'm really sorry you feel that way about me as a person, but that's not what we're discussing today. We're discussing about if this flask is good enough to go to the moon or not. And that's it, you kill it there. If you go into the same level and start insulting back or defending your family or your wife or your kids, that's not what you're there to do. And the second is the national organizational level, again, when you can have attacks at that level. So, for example, there was an issue between Macron and Bolsonaro going back a few years. Macron, the president of France, and Bolsonaro, at the time, the president of Brazil. And basically, France did not want to accept an agreement with Mercosur for free trade. And basically, Bolsonaro knew that he didn't want that agreement either. So what he did was starting a track to attack Macron and basically say, hey, what are you doing with that old wife? I mean, your average Brazilian is much prettier than your wife. Why should you spending time with her? And that was a personal attack that had nothing to do with Mercosur, with trade, with anything. But Bolsonaro used it because he thought it would distract the attention. And it didn't distract the attention of Macron, because Macron is intelligent and the French negotiators are intelligent. But it did attract the attention of the press because immediately the press was covering all these insults and whether Macron's wife was pretty or not. And who cares if she's pretty or not? It has nothing to do with it. And not to mention that pretty is about personal opinions, but that's it. Number 4, threats and ultimatums. Remember the case of the Mundo Marino, the dolphins. And I said, 2 hours until the park opens, you just read this, what are you doing there? That's a false sense of urgency. There was no sense of urgency. You could have gone, check the pool slowly, these open. If something changes, you do something about it. Don't feel cornered. This is the last time I'm going to say this. If you don't accept my offer by Friday, it's off the table. Why? I accept it when I'm ready to accept it. I'm not going to get into trouble just because of some deadline that you came up with. I'm sorry. 5, undermining. When someone wants to undermine your position by questioning your standards and where did you say you study law? You don't know anything. You don't have a clue about anything. Well, I have these photos of you. I have photos proving that you were at 3 in the morning in a bridge in Caracas exchanging information. Don't let anyone undermine your position. Don't put yourself in that position. But also, again, try and separate that discussion from the main discussion from those side issues. They're all there to disrupt simply. And of course, the last one is extreme positions. When you say it's everything or nothing. So either we have a full trade agreement or we don't agree on anything. Again, why? If someone says that, clearly that person does not want an agreement. And that's why that person is saying that. So that's how you spot disruptive behaviors. These are the type of disruptive behaviors that someone could come and bring to the negotiating table. And all of our negotiating heroes will have faced disruptive behaviors, especially those who were in the Nobel Prize list, because everyone will play these tricks in one way or the other against them. Poisoning the well. Poisoning the wells is disrupting the conversation. So red herrings, which is sending something that is a bad oh, I missed the English word, una mala pista, about trace, I think it is. So when you say COVID, oh, we found a new cure for COVID. And it's okay, show me. Oh, no, but we're 3 years away from developing it. So that's just something to distract your attention from the main negotiation you're doing. Second, invented crisis. Sorry, I can stay only for 3 days because I need to fly back to Panama because something is happening in the canal. Why? Can you prove it? Do I believe you? Can we not continue this conversation by phone or by video conference? Third, false equivalence. When you try to compare things that are not comparable. So you do the Ukraine-Russia thing and you say, well, it was the same when Hitler came to Spain. Like, well, it wasn't the same. Hitler never actually entered Spain. He supported Franco, but so don't be fooled by people giving you anecdotes of historical things or other things that they can compare because they're probably not true. Tempo controlling the same. We need to discuss this in 3 days because if not, the world is coming to an end. Who says? And roadblocks, putting impediments to an agreement. So, oh yes, but I need this validated by Congress. Oh yes, but I need my ministers to look at it. Yes, but first let's translate it and then no. Number 8, leaks. Cuando algo se escapa and goes to the press first. So if someone sends information to the press and does not respect the confidentiality of a negotiation, it means that you cannot trust the other side. You've lost that trust. Remember the saying that I was telling you from Salta in the north of Argentina. La confianza viene de a pie, pero se va al galope. So trust can be lost in 2 seconds. And sometimes deliberately by sending something to the media what they want is to stop the negotiation. Because automatically you will lose trust on the other side. False authority. When you say, I'd love to do this for you, but my hands are tied. What does it mean your hands are tied? Maybe you don't put the signature, but you can surely influence the person. Or by saying to someone, that is impossible. Nothing is impossible if the two sides want to agree on something. Number 10, flattery and gift giving. So being nice to the other thing or presenting gifts, as we were saying. The phrase special relationship is what the UK and the US use all the time to justify why the UK always votes with the US and does whatever the US say. And it's because we have a special relationship. And some people in the UK actually question what that means. Because a special relationship tends to, most of the time, be the UK saying yes to whatever the US says, and not the other way around. And finally, the unexpected. When someone does something you're not expecting. So you show up for a trip to negotiate something, and someone's organized a change of plans and said, oh, sorry, we can't have the meeting today because my president called me or something happened, so we can only meet for 2 hours this afternoon. Well, it could be a genuine problem, but also it can be an attempt to disrupt the negotiations, to stop the negotiations. So don't trust the unexpected. The unexpected sometimes can be very planned and very expected. Almost last thing today is mistakes in a negotiation. And this is again from an article in the Harvard Business Review of 2001, which this guy, James Semenius, wanted to look at the positive side, but he defines the positive side by looking at the mistakes. So these are the mistakes you can make. Mistake number 1 is neglecting the other side's problem. You cannot go to a negotiation just to solve your problems. The other side will have a problem either before or caused by your negotiation. So you have to allow them a way to come out looking good, smelling good. What the negotiators call a silver bridge. So an elegant way for the other side to present the result to the other side. So maybe we lost this border dispute, but we gained access to these ports. Or we had to reduce our prices, but now we're going to sell many more bottles of wine. So it's important to understand the other side's position. Mistake number 2, letting price bulldoze other interests. So in a commercial relationship, if you think price is the only thing that matters, then forget it. You need to make sure that price is just one more element of the negotiation. You might, as I was saying just now as an example, end up selling at a lower price, but if in exchange you get exclusivity into a supermarket chain, that's good in the long run. So don't let price be the only factor. 3, don't let your positions drive out your interest. So your position is where you're now. Your interest is where you want to be. Don't get too entrenched in your current position not to see where you want to be. I want to be the largest seller of wine in the state of New York. So if I want to do that, that's what I care about. And if this year I only sold a bottle, well, it's one bottle more than what I sold last year. It'll take time, but I'll get there. 4, searching too hard for common ground. Kissinger, who was the Secretary of State of the United States, one of the leading negotiators in the world, and I hope one of the few that someone will cover him in the presentations, would always try to find common ground, because he would always say you have more in common than not in common, and that was his view to start any negotiation. But sometimes you don't. If Russia wants to take over the Ukraine, and the Ukraine wants to be completely independent, well, maybe you don't have common ground there. It's black or white, it's one or the other. So you have to search for common ground that helps to build what comes next, but only up to a certain extent. Mistake number 5, neglecting your badness. So when you have alternatives to a negotiated agreement, if you continue negotiating beyond your BATNA, because you say, okay, let's see where this takes us from, that's a mistake. As soon as you reach your BATNA, you have to say, sorry, this is no longer of interest to me. I can go and talk to this other company and achieve the same thing. So the whole point of having a BATNA is that's what tells you when to stop. And it's important to do that. And the final one, mistake number 6, is failing to correct for skewed vision. So if you realize that you're not framing the problem in the right way, you need to be able to correct. It's not about me, it's not about your ego, it's not about feeling important. It's about achieving a result. It's about where you want to be. And if you find that you started this negotiation in the wrong foot, well, change it. Maybe you start negotiating and you send someone in the team that was not the right person, change the person. It's not the end of the world. The important thing is you have your objective clear in mind and that you get to where you want to go, because that's what makes the whole difference. And that's it for today. I hope this class was clear. We're going to start by doing a recap of this on Tuesday. I look forward to seeing you then. And please, those who have not sent me the final questions, do it as soon as possible. Well, actually, if you haven't done it yet, this was due 50 minutes ago, so don't send them now. It's too late. I won't grade them. But do send me who your heroes are, because it's important for the next classes that you can prepare and that we're all prepared to receive them. Thank you very much. See you next week. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.